Hi, I'm Deanna Mackey, founder of Public Media Women in Leadership. Thanks for joining us today for our interview with Susie Hernandez, Senior Director of Programming at WNET. This interview is part of our Motivational Minutes series celebrating our 5th anniversary, and I want to thank CARS for their support of all of our efforts this year. I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did, learning about Susie's career journey and her rise to the top. Enjoy.
So my day-to-day is as the Senior Program Director of WNET, means that I'm looking at all of our programming across multiple channels. So that includes Channel 13, WLIW, and NJTV in New Jersey, and all of those sub-channels that fall underneath that. I'm also looking at on-air fundraising strategies that WNET does monthly. We don't do the typical pledge drives. So I am looking at that across all of our channels every single month, and looking at what kind of marketing stunts around our programming we can do, and working with multiple different departments, which is why I really love programming. I really love working with the social media people, with the marketing people, with membership, with traffic, on-air promotions, all of those folks. I really enjoy doing that, and underwriting, of course. Been here for just over a year. I started in January, so it's now April. So, actually almost a year and a half. And previously I was at KQED, and actually before that I was at KUAT, or Arizona Public Media, in Tucson. That's where I started my programming career. Jack Gibson, who I consider one of my great mentors, asked me what did I really want to do when he was visiting ITVS. And I told him what I secretly really wanted to do was to be a programmer. And he said, well, if I ever have the opportunity, I will hire you. And so he had the opportunity, and his programmer in Tucson left for PBS, and he called me up and said, I would really love to mentor you, and that you have to move to Tucson, you have to leave the Bay Area, and you also have to give me 4 years. And so together we treated it like it was college, and he just gave me a really great education on what to do, what not to do, principles of programming. And I think Jack Gibson is just one of those hallmark programmers that knows so much about so many other things. Kind of a frustrating person to work with, because he knows engineering, marketing, producing, pledging. He knows everything. And if you really listen, you'll learn so much about everything. And he really taught me how to be what he would call like a holistic programmer. So don't just think about the programming, but just that long tail of what programming can mean to a community. I think I'm a child of immigrants, and so I think work is probably one of the most important things my parents instilled in us, besides an education. And they also taught us to not think of just one job. So once you get that one job, what's the next thing you want to do? And so I think that's always really taught me to think, sometimes to the frustration of my own family, but to think, okay, well, I just got here, now what's going to be my next move? So when people ask me what's my 5-year plan, I have a 1-year plan, a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, and I have no problem changing those around. I don't live or die by those plans. I'm very flexible to an extent. Certainly getting married and having a kid has and a dog has made, and house and all that other stuff has certainly made it not as flexible. But I think when you're very career minded and you're unapologetically career minded, whoever you're with, I hope they understand that, and they know that about you and enjoy that about you, and are with you on the ride for the most part. But I think the biggest thing I learned is that, and I learned at a young age, is that teachers and educators are everywhere, and it could be you could really learn a lot of lessons from what not to do from certain people, how not to lead. And then you can also learn great ways of leadership. And I think the best thing that I've ever witnessed and saw was at most of the mentors that I have were incredibly great listeners. I wouldn't say they were always generous, because they can't be generous with everybody, but they're choosy on who they're generous with. And I'm always respectful of mentors' time. But the other thing is I really shut up and listen, and listen to a lot of different people, and take what I can get from those different folks. So in my mind, I really started my career in programming really late. You know, I didn't get my first programming job until I was 40. Quite a bit of people in my role have been doing this since their 20s, and they really don't ever leave. It's very rare that people will move around. But one of the things I learned really from Jack was that if you wanted to move up, you really have to move away. And it's a really crappy option, you know, for most, but that's just the facts. And if you're really dedicated to public media, a lot of people at the station are dedicated to public media, and if they get the job that they want, they will likely never leave, and they're okay with staying in that place. And so that's what I just, you know, found out, is that if you really want to move up, you're going to have to move away. And I think as a parent, but also as a mom, I mean, you know, there's dads that are parents too, but I think as a mom, there's usually an extra layer of guilt and worry and concern. And I certainly have those things, but I'm really lucky in that I because I started programming so late, I have made it very clear that I feel like I'm really behind. And I you know, as some people say, you've had like a meteoric, I can't say the word, but you know, a really quick rise to the place that you've gotten. And I feel like, well, I'm really behind. And so I take up all the opportunities I can. If Jack needed me to do something, just to use him as an example, if he wanted me to do something that was not related to programming, but he knew I knew distribution, and he knew I knew marketing, and he knew I knew how to do this or that with social media, I did it. And if I didn't know how to do something exactly, I was not afraid to ask him, how do you think this should be done? And if he didn't know, he wasn't afraid to say, I don't know, but why don't you ask blah, 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 or so-and-so at this other station who seems to be, you know, at the, you know, the role model in that position. And that really was sincerely helpful to me, but it also made me expand my circle. I wasn't just communicating with just programmers or just producers, but I was also communicating with very, very, very different people at different stations. One of the things when I was interviewing with WNET that we talked about a lot, because, you know, first of all, people thought I was nuts for leaving KQED. And KQED is an amazing place to work, that for sure. Very innovative, that's their reputation, and they really, that's in the, you know, it's in our skeleton, it's in the skin, it's in the blood, it's in the bones. It's like every when you walk through the door, the expectation is to think innovatively all the time. And so, you know, when you go into, and it's a large organization, and it's very hard to pivot, and they do pretty well on pivoting, and it's mainly because it's a state of mind to pivot. I think when I was interviewing with WNET, that was one of the things we talked a lot about, is that the benefit to having me come in was that I knew enough about programming and strategy, but I also had a fresh eyes, and there was a lot of people in the building that had been there for decades. And I jokingly tell people that when I only would come to WNET 1 week out of the month, because I still had a child at home, and Neil Shapiro was brilliant at, you know, he's a real family man, first of all. And so he immediately said, I do not want you to move while your daughter's in school. Why don't you wait for her to finish and then you come here? but I want you to start working. So I work from home in California, and I'm the one that said, why don't I come 1 week out of the month? And at least so I can meet people and see people. And when I would come in, the way I would meet people is by going to retirement parties. That's how, so many people had been there for years. And I'd introduce myself and say, hi, I'm brand new. Sorry that we couldn't get to work together. And then I'd find out that they had been there forever. And that's just, WNET is a great place to work. I know that it adds so much value when I'm in a meeting and people are thinking, here's how we normally do it, which I think is death. It's absolute death to say, we've always done it this way, so let's keep on doing it. But, that's really probably the biggest value that anyone new can bring in, is to actually share their ideas. And what do I care if people don't agree with me or not? I'm just saying, hey, my years of experience of working at not one, but two, actually 3 different stations, because I worked also at KRCB. I've worked at a small station, a medium-sized station, a large station, and now I'm at the top market. And people listen, because why not? It doesn't hurt to just hear a different perspective. I think that's really the value of moving around, and it's healthy for the system to do that, to allow different people to experience, not only for me to experience them, but for them to experience me, and to have these different perspectives. The other thing that we haven't really touched on is also as a person of color, it's, there's a lot of women, I think, working in public media right now. They just aren't at the top, as you know. There's just also a fewer number of people of color that are working. And when I first started, I felt like there was a lot of people of color in the system. And then people downsized, or when people retire, they don't get there's not someone that comes and replaces them. And it's a lot of because the business is changing. But I think that's one of the things that's the toughest thing to do, is to not only bring in women, but also bring in people of color into our family. And increasingly, when I work around, it's like fewer and fewer of people of color around. And I think as a person of color, and certainly as a woman, I'm always looking to see what kind of opportunities I can provide, and also how can I promote people as much as possible. And I think one of the things that works is actually giving people credit for the work that they do, and making sure that Neil, or whoever is my boss, or whoever is higher up, knows that I didn't come up with this idea, this other person did. They're not at the table, so I will speak, and hopefully next time they'll be brought to the table, because I've mentioned their name so many darn times. But I think that's, kind of the job that I have here too. I think when we moved back to the Bay Area, we thought we were never going to leave. And the problem is, though, that I really felt like I hit the ceiling pretty fast. And although I was given a lot of incredible opportunities, I didn't like that feeling of being hit, just realizing I'm never moving up to an upper level. And it was really that Jack that helped me out, that said, there's so many jobs out right now, and there's this new thing called Chief Content Officer that is, you really should have your eye on that, and production, this, so I didn't realize that I actually had a really good foundation, a better foundation than I thought. Certainly moving to the East Coast was a really difficult conversation. And, my husband, has worked with public media organizations. He currently works for a public media organization. But, he's in California. He was very familiar with ITVS. He was very familiar with KQED. And, when you live in the Bay Area, everyone knows KQED. So it's not like people didn't know what I was doing. Everyone was, every stranger was like, if they saw the KQED logo, they were thrilled. It's that popular. So anyway, back to moving, it was really hard, because we're total Bay Area people. And obviously moving to New York was a dream that I've had. I just didn't think it would happen. But I definitely said, if when Paula Kerger has asked me, what do you want to do? Say I told her I would love to work in New York, and she said, I hope that happens for you sometime. And she was very supportive when that job came up, and I think most people knew that about me. I think my husband didn't think it was going to happen because, again, he didn't think, how would that opportunity come up? And when I saw that I wasn't moving up at KQED, but moving out, what I mean is, like, my job wasn't moving this way, it was moving this way. I was getting more things under me, but I wasn't going up. And it probably would have been, if I had waited a couple of more years, maybe I would have gotten that opportunity. But and it was tough to talk about moving again. And it wasn't because of my mom or my sisters or the gazillion friends that we have in the Bay Area. Because when you hear, oh, we're moving to the New York area, most people are like, dang, that sounds amazing. Yes, make sure you have a bed for me. Make sure, like, everyone was excited about that. My husband was not so excited. And luckily he works in the media industry and saw that there's a lot of opportunities here, but it took quite a few discussions. And I think I think what kind of tipped the scales in my favor, if you will, is Neil Shapiro saying, don't move until you guys are ready. Being career-minded, you have to be very clear that's important, that a career is important. And so is family life, of course. Family life is critical, but I was raised, because we moved around so much, that your family's with you all the time. You could live anywhere and be happy because your family will be with you. And I think that was a little bit harder to convince this time around. I did promise to not move for quite a while. So if Neil Shapiro's watching this, he knows that unless I mess up, I'm actually sticking around for quite some time, because I promised that we would stay more than 4 years. So that's probably like the biggest promise I ever had to make. But I think there's just so many opportunities, and I think if I can encourage anyone, it's to really dig deep on, what do you want to do? And then I think, because as a woman, certainly you see with your friends and with your own colleagues, real genius walking around, and they just don't want to leave. And when you ask them why not, 9 times out of 10, it's just, they just think that move will be hard. And if you don't talk about it, if you don't just ask, my husband was more, at the time, my boyfriend, more than willing to move to Tucson. To be honest, I didn't really invite him to come. I was just telling him I was going, but he was like, I'm there. He was writing it. And when we moved back to the Bay Area, no problem. And all the moves were hard. Moving is very difficult, and your family and your extended family, and all of those things are very tough. But I think, I really, really love leading, and I really love being a leader. And I really, and by leadership, I mean not just bossing people around. I don't mean that at all. I mean really being engaged and thinking of the health of the system. And I really do think that I'm providing a value by moving around. And it's certainly helping me shape myself into what I want to do next. I have an incredible boss right now. I work directly under Neil Shapiro. I'm pretty damn lucky, and I didn't think that would happen. And I'm learning a lot. I'm learning tons. And I know that I'm sharing and spreading the education, because the people I work with say that all the time. And I ask them, I hope you're learning something from me, because I'm definitely learning things from you. And that's what makes work valuable to me. there's a couple of like business models that I see working right now in the system. You know, it's so boring to say, it's so cliche, but it's true that our business is changing. It has changed and it will continue to change. And certainly, you know, as we're recording this, we're in shelter in place right now. So that's definitely a rapid school education right now on how we all need to work and how we still need to be effective in the community. What I would like to do more is just more partnerships, content partnerships at the local level that could involve station producers, but also could be involving community producers. And I think not knowing how long this is all going to happen, I think, you know, there's a lot more people interested in communicating and telling their story, and how could we fold in their stories into broadcast, but but also beyond broadcast. One of the things I've really been working on in the last couple of really this year has been bolstering up Passport at the local level, but I'm also always interested in working with PBS because you know, a lot of my career has been working nationally, not locally. And so, you know, when I was at ITVS, I worked on big series and worked on a lot of national projects that I still think national quite a bit. But, you know, I'm looking at how can I change, or how can WNET be more effective in the community? And then also, how can I apply those things and share that with PBS so that we can make that more on the national scale, things like that. And I think, you know, looking at a project like American Portrait, for example, you know, that's really bringing community voices at the local and national level. But I think what we need to do is really look at Passport and how we can provide more services. I'm really looking at how we can evolve membership and pledge, and on the air as well, not just thinking digitally, but also on the air. And you know, those, you know, looking at those kind of things. Also, you know, I think engagement is a big trigger word right now, and I would love to play more in that and see how can we engage our communities, and not just at the serious, you know, level of you know, all the issues, because I do every once in a while think, oh my gosh, we take ourselves so seriously. It's like, where's the fun? Where's the fun? But I am looking at those kind of things. What new genres can we bring to public television at the local level or the national level? And I really am enjoying meeting certain people in New York to talk about these new things. And it could be digital only, and they could be national, or they could be just local. People are excited to work with us. And I just think opening up our doors a little bit more will bring in fresh ideas. And that's really probably the things I'm going to be focusing on in the next year and a half. I would say that if you're not looking, if anyone who's watching isn't looking for a job, what they should do and ask is if anyone they know is looking. And the reason why I say that is because, like, I myself hear about jobs all the time. It's actually one of my favorite pastimes is to help other people get work, as is yours, Deanna. I love looking to see, and I love hearing about so and so has this job opening, and I like to call other people and see if they would ever be interested, and then talk them into it, and hopefully they apply and go for it. But it's really about, you know, we need to really build up our network. And I, about once a year, just ask people at conferences, you know, what's the next job you want to do? You know, and the first thing I'm always looking for is who wants to be a GM? Anyone want to be a GM? Because every year there's a lot of GM jobs open, and you and I both know that a lot of the GMs that are now getting hired, and this is for good or for bad, are not within the family. You know, they're outside. And I just said that outside influences are great and having new people come in, but if there's someone that's interested in that role internally but live in a different state, you know, it's possible that, you know, that hiring committee just doesn't know that person. And, you know, how can we all help, you know, promote these other people, these other amazing people that live in different states that just don't have just don't have that networking opportunities. I think that's like what I like to do more is just how can we build up the opportunities more for networking. So I like to ask people once a year when I'm at the PBS annual meeting, so I won't be able to do that this year, who wants to be a GM? It's always my ongoing question. But then I like to ask people like, why wouldn't you ever move? And I think as long as we keep on asking ourselves that, there's going to be someone that's like, no, actually, I would move. I would be interested in that. And then that person, as if they communicate that, or if they get asked, maybe they're not being asked, but if they actually say it, now that thought has gone into my head, and now I will definitely tell so and so I do know someone who could be interested. I actually would probably tell you, Deanna, hey, did you know that so and so in that state is interested in moving? Because that's how we get jobs. It's not just from applying to complete strangers. You do really have to know people, and we're a family, and we're always looking out for each other. And that's what's so great about working in public media, is that we're small. There's very few people who know what we're doing. And our communities, our various communities are very tiny. And if you are, you just plug in someone's name, that's a leg up for you for sure. Just making sure that other people know who you are. I think that's probably the biggest thing is networking and communicating what you really want to do as many times as you can.